The family cherished Mark's uncle deeply. He was a pillar of support, offering sage advice and practical help whenever needed. His recent passing left a void that was palpable as the family gathered at the notary's office 2 weeks later. The somber atmosphere reflected their genuine grief rather than any eagerness about potential inheritances. However, Mark's expression shifted from sorrow to surprise upon hearing his bequest. His uncle, demonstrating a profound understanding of his nephew, had left Mark his treasured truck. This choice puzzled Mark initially. For years he had admired the vehicle, which his uncle had kept meticulously maintained yet rarely used, always securely stored in the barn. Mark often wondered why his uncle was so protective of the truck, never allowing anyone else to drive it. Mark's uncle had always been oddly protective of the truck, a mystery that would soon unravel. For now, Mark focused on the practicality of his inheritance. As a freelance carpenter with a failing van, this truck was a timely blessing. Accompanied by his grieving Aunt Marcia, Mark visited his late uncle's property. She led him to the barn, handing over the keys with a poignant request. "Take good care of it. It held special significance for your uncle." Mark's promise was sincere, but his drive home proved unexpectedly challenging. The truck handled peculiarly, more akin to a tank than a pickup. It struggled on inclines and seemed to surge downhill, as if propelled by an unseen force. This unusual behavior nearly caused an accident when the vehicle began rolling backward at a traffic light, narrowly avoiding disaster. Arriving home shaken, Mark parked the truck and began a thorough inspection. Despite multiple examinations, he found no obvious faults. The engine appeared sound, the tires properly inflated, and the exterior unblemished. As Mark pondered this perplexing situation, his aunt called. Her whispered, anxious tone immediately put him on alert. She inquired about his solitude before revealing a disturbing development. Unfamiliar, suspicious individuals were prowling her property, focusing on the barn. Alarmed, Mark asked, "What's happening, Aunt Marcia? Why are you whispering?" Her hushed reply conveyed fear of potential intruders, prompting Mark's immediate concern for her safety and a desire to intervene in what seemed to be a trespassing situation. Mark's immediate impulse was to rush to his aunt's aid. "Don't worry, Aunt Marcia. I'll be there in 15 minutes with Uncle's truck," he declared resolutely. His aunt's reaction, however, was unexpectedly frantic. She pleaded with Mark to keep the truck concealed at his place. "These men are here for that very vehicle," she explained, her voice trembling. "I overheard them from my hiding spot." Bewildered, Mark gazed at the truck. What's their interest in it? Aunt Marcia couldn't provide answers, only relaying the intruder's desperate urgency to locate it. Suddenly, she fell silent. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible, the men having drawn dangerously close to her hiding place. "I must go, they might hear me," she whispered. Suggesting a nearby cafe for a safer conversation, she added a puzzling request. "Come on foot, keep the truck hidden, and try to find a handle on it. They kept mentioning it." The call abruptly ended, leaving Mark staring at the enigmatic vehicle, his mind racing with questions about his aunt's safety and the truck's significance. Heeding his aunt's warning, Mark concealed the truck at the back of his property before embarking on his peculiar mission to find the mysterious handle. His initial searches proved fruitless, both inside and outside the vehicle. But after half an hour of meticulous examination, something caught his eye. A small protrusion beneath the rear bumper. As Mark's fingers traced the edge and pushed the jutting piece, something unexpected occurred. Mark's discovery left him astounded. The truck's entire rear bed lifted, revealing a hidden compartment. As he peered into the concealed space, a long, bewildered breath escaped him. "What in the world?" Mark murmured, his eyes widening as he raised the bed further. The space beneath was filled with items that clearly didn't belong in a standard pickup truck. Cautiously, Mark reached in. Hundreds of boxes were nestled within, resembling old-fashioned, elongated matchboxes typically used for fireplaces. "This can't be safe," he muttered, noting their aged appearance. Examining one box, Mark confirmed his suspicion about their age from the expiration date. However, upon opening it, his face drained of color. Instead of matches, the box contained a more ornate container. Inside this, to Mark's utter disbelief, were diamonds. Frantically, Mark opened more boxes, each revealing various precious gems and high-end jewelry. His confusion quickly turned to alarm as the magnitude of his discovery sank in. Overwhelmed with anxiety, Mark felt thrust into a perilous situation he'd rather avoid. Yet, concern for his aunt's safety prevented him from walking away. Nervously, he returned the boxes to their hiding place. Following his aunt's instructions, Mark waited before heading to the cafe on foot. 40 minutes later, he entered, spotting his aunt in a corner booth gazing out the window. As he slid into the seat opposite her, Mark's voice was tense with urgency. "Aunt Marcia, what's going on here? Did you find the handle those men were searching for?" Aunt Marcia inquired. Mark confirmed with a nod, then pressed, "Why are there hundreds of hidden jewelry boxes in Uncle's truck? And who were those men on your property?" Marcia's face clouded with worry. "That truck has been hidden in the barn for over 2 decades. Your uncle guarded it fiercely, and now I understand why." The situation reeked of criminal activity to Mark. "Is this stolen jewelry? Was Uncle a thief? No one has this many valuables without criminal intent. Am I right, Aunt Marcia?" "Yes and no," she replied carefully. "Your uncle didn't steal anything, but every piece under that truck bed is indeed stolen. The men at our property today were the original thieves from over 20 years ago." Mark's confusion grew. His aunt's sudden wealth of information seemed at odds with her earlier ignorance. "How do you know all this now?" he pressed. Marcia explained. "You're right. I knew nothing before. But after they left, I searched for answers. In the back of our closet, I found your uncle's old journal. It detailed everything." She continued, "According to the journal, 4 thieves arrived at your uncle's property over 2 decades ago. They had just completed a heist and cleverly hidden their loot under their getaway truck's bed. But the police were in pursuit. Your uncle was working in the barn when they burst in, threatening him. They demanded he hide their vehicle until they could retrieve it safely. My husband must have feared for his life," Marcia continued. "The criminals likely struggled to launder the goods, as the truck remained hidden for 2 decades. They must have learned of my husband's passing and returned to claim their loot." Mark, believing in his uncle's integrity, was shocked by this revelation. "We need to act. These criminals must be caught, Aunt Marcia. We can't let you live in fear, and we must clear Uncle's name." Agreeing, they headed to the police station, relating their incredible story. The combination of their account and Mark's uncle's journal convinced the officers of its veracity. "We need a plan to apprehend these criminals," an officer declared. After a brief consultation, they returned with a strategy, warning, "You may not like this, but we'll need your help." The plan involved using Mark as bait, driving the truck around town to attract the thieves' attention. Marcia would need to allow the truck back on her property, with Mark parking it in the barn each evening, setting a trap for the criminals. Despite their nervousness, aunt and nephew agreed to participate, recognizing it as their best chance for resolution. For 3 days, Mark conspicuously drove the truck around town, returning it to the barn each night where he and a police squad lay in wait. On the 3rd evening, the criminals returned to Marcia's property, heading straight for the barn. As they approached the truck, over 10 officers emerged from hiding, successfully apprehending the thieves. After more than 2 decades, justice was served. Marcia could finally live without fear, and the shadow over her late husband's reputation was lifted. Mark retained ownership of the truck, now unburdened by its hidden cargo and criminal history. We've reached the end of this intriguing tale. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Have you ever stumbled upon an unexpected discovery or been involved in an unusual situation like Mark's? Perhaps you've inherited something that turned out to be more than it seemed at first glance? I invite you to share your experiences or reactions to this story in the comments section below. Your insights and stories could add another fascinating dimension to this discussion. Thank you for taking the time to engage with this narrative. Your participation and viewpoints are valuable and appreciated.